Ladies and gentlemen, oh God. Wait, what?
Nothing.
Thanks. All right. Good afternoon, sports fans, and welcome to the BallNine Roundhouse. Once again, we have some returning guests, and we have a new special guest today. Right below me on your screen, you see Sal Marinello, the owner of Athletic Development Coaching in Millburn, New Jersey. How are you today, Sal?
Good. Thanks for having me, guys.
No problem, man. No problem. We have Kevin Kernan, America's most beloved sports writer. He's going bananas over there.
Perfect for me.
Way down there, we have Dan Tiant. We all know Dan. He needs no introduction. How you doing, Dan? He's pissing excellence today. Nice.
Today.
And last, good. And last but not least, our ombudsman, Rocco Constantino. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, what's going on, man? How are you?
Good. Any day the Mets beat up the Phillies is a good day.
Oh, jeez. We'll get to that in a bit. I just wanted to talk about today. You know, we know this season is weird. It's a short season, but I mean, are these guys ready for it? You see a team like the Yankees, even the Rays pitching staff, the Astros have a lot. These guys are like the walking dead out there. All right, so Sal, I want to start with you. You had an interview with Kevin the other day for BallNine where you kind of got into this a little bit, and I'm curious as to your insight on what the hell is going on here with these guys dropping like flies.
Well, I mean, you made a point about was it the preparation for this season, and I would say, no, because they've had the same problems all the time, and these guys are no longer experiencing an off season. They're always training. They're always doing things, and they've played. This is a generation now that's played baseball all year round since they were little kids. So I think we have a combination, like a perfect storm of factors here. You've got guys who played all year round. You've got this training methodology that we could talk about for weeks and why it's bad, and how it's strayed from really what it should be, and the lack of understanding that you have to start changing things and get back to what the sport is about. What happened, I think, and Kevin has said this to me over the years, the athletes have gotten better, but they're not better baseball players. And I think because these guys are athletes to some extent, they do these things in training that are great, maybe because they're athletic, but they're not helping them for baseball. So in a nutshell, I think that's what you got. And one last thing I'll say with particular interest to pitchers is they've created this structure that's so fragile, that's so specific in trying to fix and allow for every possibility. They've actually made these guys more fragile rather than robust like they used to be. And I hate, to be that guy back in the old days, but back in the old days.
That's very understandable. I mean, you speak about pitching. Kevin, you also wrote an article very recently about Tampa. Now, their pitching staff ravaged by injuries. I'm looking at it now. Cody Reed, he's out. Ryan Yarborough, he's out with a groin. Oliver Drake, bicep. Alvarado, shoulder. It just goes on and on and on. Beeks, Chaz Rowe. These guys are just dropping like flies. What do you think about this? Are they just overtraining? Are they getting too muscular? I mean, we see it with Syndergaard and guys like that. Are they just working too much on looking like Thor and not enough looking like Bartolo Colon?
Well, really, with the pitch count now and the limits to 100 pitches all the time, and in the minor leagues, there should be no injuries. That's what we were told, right? The pitch counts are going to solve everything. Everything is wrong with the system. They have guys now and here's the biggest thing I want to point out right now, what's going on right now with these guys. They're bringing in nerds to be pitching coaches, and they're looking at video, high-speed video. They're working about spin rate. And the point is the ball now spins more because it's the Manfred ball, and this year the Manfred ball is slicker and has less seams. So you're getting a higher spin rate. So you're getting all this stuff done, all this analytics, but nobody's teaching mechanics. You watch bodies, the way they throw, the way they're opening up, and whenever they make a mistake, it's always about execution. So top to bottom, it's a bad system. And these nerds are not watched anymore because there's nerds in charge of them. So it's a progression of nerds who don't know what they're doing. And it's really that simple. One quick story, because I know everybody wants to get in here. way back when, Jack McKeon is managing in Missoula, Montana. His pitcher, he had a bet that this pitcher was going to make the majors before the big bonus baby. This is way back when. He goes out to his pitcher. It's the 6th inning. He tells the kid, you got the bases loaded. You got yourself into it. Find a way to get out of it. Be an athlete. Play your position. Do what you got to do. The kid gets out of it. He goes on to make the majors. He pitches like 25 years. His name is Jim Cott. They're so putting bubble wrap now across the board. And even today, I watched some of that Mets-Phillies game, and the guys are making errors on simple plays. They're not athletic baseball players anymore, and I'm sure you guys can address that as well.
I agree. I mean, I think some of these guys are too big to get out of their own way. So, Dan, as a guy who represents younger players and also is involved in their training, what do you tell your guys? What do you have them avoid while training so they don't wind up on the shelf like all these guys seem to be right now?
Well, I think we hit some important parts here. Sal was talking about, fundamentals of stuff. We don't, as has Kevin, we don't focus on that. They're getting these athletes and making them baseball players, but yet we're not learning the basics of the game. And that is a big problem, in my opinion, because you got to teach them how to throw a ball properly, how to run properly, how to swing a bat properly. They doing these things, and they just like, well, this kid's an athlete. He's a freak of nature. Let's get him in there. And they're ruining them. Yeah, are they bigger? Are they stronger? Absolutely. Are they faster? But, nobody can figure out why these guys are getting hurt more than in the time when my dad played. What I try to do is I try to talk to them. I'm big on fitness. I'm big on strength and conditioning. And I tell my guys to train the proper way. I look at their coaches that they work with, and I kind of get familiar with them and make sure they do things the right way. I do question some of the exercises that they do that I just don't think are meant for baseball, but they do them anyway. But I try to tell them not to get to the point of a Chapman or Stanton. You don't need to be that big to play baseball. If you look in the past, you look at Mays, you look at Hank Aaron, these guys were like my height, my size. And they had massive forearms. They can hit, but they were flexible, which is a big, big thing that I don't see these guys being anymore. They work so much on core, but I don't think they work a lot on the actual flexibility, and they go into this heavy weight training that they look like they should be playing football. And there's no need for that in baseball. There really isn't. And so I try to tell them to work smart and also talk to some of the old-time ball players. What do they do to have 25-year careers, 20-year careers? I mean, you look at my dad, for example, there's no way in hell that man should have played 25 professional years. And, and it's like he said, he goes, all I did was run long distance because I was a pitcher, so I need endurance. Stretched a lot because he needed flexibility. He did his push-ups, and he threw a weighted ball. Yeah. Long toss. He didn't do anything of this cleans and massive squats, and they don't need to do that. They don't need to do all that. And that's what's causing, in my opinion, a lot of these guys to get hurt.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, now, Rocco, you as we know, you're an athletic director, college. I mean, is there anything that when you're dealing with the strength and conditioning coaches, is there anything you try to have them avoid, or, and how are you guys faring with injury?
On our level, they're good. We do have a couple there, and they're excellent, good, great young instructors, and they're, up on all the latest stuff and everything. But they're great to tailor activities to the sport and to specifically what they need. Actually, our strength and conditioning coach for our baseball team is a female, and she's awesome. She's all about the plyometrics, the stretching, the conditioning. It's not bodybuilding. It's preparing baseball players to play baseball games. All right. And she does a great job. And we've been very fortunate, in the time that I've been here, our baseball team has been really healthy, especially, our key players. We don't have any kind of rash of Tommy Johns. Usually kids are pretty good with their hamstrings and things of that nature. So I think we do a pretty good job here. But you do say it. I mean, I get emails all the time from people soliciting, trying to be hired as strength and conditioning coaches just out of the blue. And it's all these resumes and photos of people that they're training, and they're just not baseball player type of athletes. They're training bodybuilders. And to me, it's, bodybuilding is different than team sports. And,
the other problem is we're in a football dominant landscape, and football dominates the strength programs at all colleges, unfortunately. So usually what your I've seen it, girls lacrosse's program looks a lot like the football team's program. The soccer program looks a lot like the football team's program. You should be able to look at a lacrosse or a baseball player. I use those because there's a lot more rotation with movement in those sports. You should be able to look at those programs and say, oh yeah, I think this kid might play field hockey, lacrosse, baseball, whereas it all looks the same because it's dominated by the football program. Your best bet is when you have either a good split. I know the head strength coach at University of North Carolina, he's in charge of baseball. Football has their own coach, and a lot of these bigger schools now are separating the Olympic and non-Olympic sports, so you have that kind of separation and not that bleed in from a philosophy that really has no place in those other sports.
It's actually interesting you say that. That's going to bring us to our Joe Blow call.
Hey guys, Joe Blow from Mudville. Man, the show's getting popular. I had a hard time getting through this time. Hey, so anyway, another injury, another hamstring injury, sliding or whatever in this short and crazy season. So I guess my question for all you guys is, like, hey, look, I remember when guys trained with a 12-ounce bottle and wore baggy flannel so nobody could see their physique. And now these guys look like they're getting ready for a weight training expose. But are they spending too much time training individual and isolation muscle training that they're not training to play ball and to just train their body to be baseball players instead of being guys that can sit in the cage at batting practice and hit the ball 487 feet? I don't know. Just a thought. Hate to see guys get hurt. Well, unless they're on the Red Sox, of course. See ya. Bye.
And Sal, I'm going to let you start with that because you were kind of getting onto that track already. So
what I would say, Chris, is with the hamstring in particular, and I think you could also look at obliques and some of these injuries. Guys are not training. If we're talking about baseball, they're not training at the speed that they are competing at. In other words, they're doing movements that don't translate to the field of play, either because of specificity of the type of movement or the speed. Also, what I'll tell you is hamstrings are a symptom. No one has a hamstring problem because it's the hamstring itself. It's just like if any of you guys work with kids, 14-year-olds who have knee issues don't have knee issues because their knee is a problem. There's something else that is creating that. That's the weak link. If you want to stick to baseball, in my opinion, from what I've seen and what I hear from people like Kevin, is nobody knows how to sprint. The cutting edge of all the research now is that without proper sprint form, everything that's less intense, in other words, not at that high speed, also is done poorly. So if you can't sprint properly, your agility is going to be poor. And from that, everything follows. If there's not attention paid to how someone runs, and I'm not talking about distance running. Distance running is low intensity, but sprinting, really, attention to sprinting and having people teach these guys how to run properly will go a long way to fix a lot of these problems.
it's understandable. And real quick, Sal, one more question from me is, do you think it's like the specialization that these kids are only playing one sport now? I mean, kids are, does that have something to do with it as well? Or?
Yeah, well, Chris, I think what we've seen is we've gone through a couple of cycles here where we had kids playing everything. Then we had kids specializing and playing that all year round. Now what I see is you're having kids play more than one sport all year round. So I worked with the soccer club. We'll go to the soccer club and you hear it amongst the parents, or they'll come flat out and say, oh, so-and-so's a little tired. We just came from lacrosse, or we just came from basketball. So they're playing these sports. So you have a combination now, Chris. It's much more complex because they're doing more. They're doing more all year round, and there's no off season from any of these activities.
That's understandable. Dan, I'm curious to hear what your view is on that. These guys are just bulking up and hitting the ball to the moon, but now they can't seem to jog to second base on a pass ball or something.
Right. I mean, I agree with Sal on this. You know, I played growing up. I played baseball. I played football. I played soccer. You know, and you had your seasons. And he's right. Everything is specialized now. It's elite. Everything's elite, 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 elite. But yet you can't throw a baseball from first base to third. It's not elite. You need to understand the game. You understand the sports, and they're doing that. They're. I think you see so many of these programs today that are pushing that we're an elite program, or we're elite at this, and we're elite at that. Come play and train with us year round, and travel teams and all this. It's too much garbage.
Yeah.
These kids need to rest. You need to rest. Okay, it's okay for you to play football and then come back next season and you're going to play baseball, and then it's basketball season. That's what we all did, and you're able to use all your muscles. You're able to run. You're able to use your entire body. Now all this focusing on one thing, and you look at pitchers. You look at these travel teams, and it's throwing X amount of innings and just pitch, but yet the poor kid doesn't even know how to throw a ball. But yet you're a special unit. You're an elite program. Kid's just throwing 100 something pitches, and then he's pitching again in 2 more days for another 60. But if he had the proper mechanics, I don't see that being a big issue. But when they don't, they're just killing their arms. They're killing their arms, and that's what I'm seeing a lot of. There's so many travel teams on every sport, and that needs to take a step back, because these kids they really need to be kids again. They need to be kids again and learn that, you know what, when it's summertime, you're going to be playing spring and summer, you're going to be playing baseball. When it's fall, you're going to be playing football. It's a good thing to have. And since that's been gone, I think that's why you see a lot of injuries too. I mean, I'm sorry, but I see a lot of these elite programs, and these kids don't even know how to play the game.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, and now, Kevin, when you wrote the column with Sal a couple of weeks back, you had brought up the point that these guys, even the pros, that they train year round. They're not letting their muscles recuperate. They're not healing. They're not getting back into shape. And you brought up a great point, which was, a generation ago, spring training was for getting in shape after a long off season. These guys are training year round, hitting tires, lifting supermodels up. How do you think that how do you think that affects not only the injuries, but the play on the field, and, kind of how many people think that baseball is just not fun anymore because these guys can't play baseball?
Well, this is what guys used to look like, right?
Yeah.
The bobbleheads.
Yeah.
They used to look like this. Now, I just saw an injury the other day. Ramirez, the outfielder.
Oh, yeah.
He blew his hammy out. He was basically on the IL because of COVID. He comes back. He smells a hit. He tries to make that burst of speed, which Sal was talking about, and he blows out a hammy. And you look at the size of his legs; they're huge. So they overtrain certain parts of their body because and they want to make it look like they want to do a certain amount of things. I won't name a player, but I remember years ago going into watching a Mets workout with training. They let me in the front door, and I'm watching this player lift a plates after plates of weights, doing this, and I'm saying this guy's going to blow his back out. The guy blew his back out. So there's no common sense in how they train him. They don't train him like baseball players, and here's the essential problem: GMs fall for a line of BS from a certain trainer or a certain system, and like the Yankees this year, they were supposed to be, injury proof. They have more injuries this year than last year, and I'm not saying it's the situation with who they hired, because I learned from Sal a long time ago. The biggest when you know about future injuries is past injuries. So if you have past injuries, you're already dealing with a broken project,
right,
and it's going to happen down the road. But because they don't do the right training, and I'm giving you one more example. I was talking to a Mets pitcher this spring training, and he was telling me he's going to follow Jacob deGrom's weightlifting program, because Jacob deGrom just goes in there, does a couple weights light, and basically moves out, doesn't listen to what they want him to do. He does his own thing. Jacob deGrom got that long, lean, athletic body. They think everyone has to have the Aaron Judge body now. And Judge, I think, I'm really disappointed in the Judge situation this year because he knew this was coming. And I think I want Sal to address this because this is very important. He gets a calf injury, and the natural reaction is, oh, he hurt his calf running. But that can happen in other ways if there's certain torque in his swing. And I believe it's his right calf, which would be his back foot. So address that, Sal, a little bit, how a calf injury can come from somewhere else besides running.
Well, if you want to just look at him particularly, he has that batting coach that has this very specific high intensity, which it should be. I don't have a problem with the system, but what I will tell you is if he's not training in a manner that's consistent with the forces he's producing in his swing, that's what's going to go. I mean, that's the weak link in this chain, right? He's not going to have necessarily a hip injury right off the bat. That could be something that migrates over time. But when you watch that explanation of how that hitting coach teaches, and it's pretty cool, and I'm not saying I disagree with it. I think it's actually very interesting. But if Aaron Judge is training in a manner that doesn't involve the speeds and that high speed rotation in his training, then he's training to hurt himself. Because under stress of competition, he's asking his body to do something he is not prepared for in his training. And, someone might say, well, you're being picky, but with what you're talking about, and obviously Dan knows better because he was in that major league realm, those forces and what those guys are doing every day has no comparison to the normal person who's trying to relate to what they do because they go to the gym, right? So something like that for a guy like Aaron Judge, you're on the razor's edge. One of the people I've met over my life was the head athletic trainer for the Houston Rockets. And he said, and he had been in several jobs for the NBA. What he said is, this is all managing that fine line between injury and high performance because of what their bodies can do. So again, go back to Judge. If he's doing something in his training that's incompatible with his swing mechanics, he's going to hurt himself over and over. Nothing will ever fix that. As a matter of fact, a guy like that probably doesn't need to do much of anything because of his natural gifts. And I wouldn't even have him in the weight room because exactly what's happening to him would be the fear. Because what you do in the weight room, there is no way to recreate what you need to do for baseball in the weight room. Zero.
Sal, let me add one little thing to this because I was talking to a former player and he addressed that. He said that the strength and conditioning coaches they're bringing into baseball now, they don't realize the what a 9-inning game does to a player and how you're using your muscles and how you're on edge that whole 9 innings. If you're doing it right, you're really stressing your body out, and they then want you to go out into the weight room right afterwards and work out. That's a recipe for disaster, and it's common sense. Common sense has been lost.
That's insane. I mean, like you said, it's like, let's work out after we worked out. I mean, especially with the length of baseball games and what you're asking these guys to do. You had told me that 20 years ago, guys were working out after they play, which also, that's another subject to get into, gives you an idea for other supplements they may be availing themselves of to help themselves, if you will, without getting into it. But you're not doing that eating healthily and sleeping, and that's it. There's other things involved if you're able to work out after playing a 3-hour, 9-inning ball game.
It's kind of like, on the converse side, be like ordering 2 pizzas after you ate a whole lasagna. Now, speaking of lasagna and pizza, Rocco, since you just got back from Jersey, and I'm jealous about that, I just wanted to hear your take on it. Again, you work in college athletics, so just curious to hear, do you have any giants that you have to tell, hey, listen, back off, man. You have to be a little more flexible and play the sport that you're here to play.
Yeah, not quite on this level yet, but I agree. Everybody's hitting the nail on the head. It's a complex situation. I always think back when, we were growing up, you'd almost be able to look at a stranger, walk by, see an athlete. Oh, he looks like a baseball player. Yeah. He looks like a football player. He looks like a basketball guy. Now they all look the same. On the professional and the high levels, they're all these big guys, big bodies, big upper bodies. It's that eye test where we're used to growing up and watching baseball and seeing people and using our own eyes, as opposed to people who are trying to stick with the data, the nerds, like Kevin says. But if you look at the data, it's saying things are being done wrong. So which one is it? You're training a certain way, injuries are going up, data is showing that. So we're ignoring that data. But then the other stuff, when it fits their narrative, they'll use the data for that. So it's a real complex situation. I say, look at what Nolan Ryan's training methods were. He was never a bodybuilder, but you're not going to find somebody tougher or more durable than him. And he was, bikes, running, long tossing, weighted balls, same type of stuff as Louis Tiant. And those are the guys that were durable. And why don't we learn from our past with that?
When we used to, Rocco, I don't want to interrupt, but when you brought up Nolan Ryan, when we used to interview him after games, I specifically remember in the Astrodome going in to interview Ryan after a game, and he's sitting on the bike, doing the bike. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's exactly what we're talking about.
That's it. You look at, and look, when I was growing up and playing, my brother was my strength coach. He was a bodybuilder himself, but he knew how to train me for the specific sport, which was baseball, or when I played football, was football. And my dad would throw a fit because I was in the gym with him at 5 a.m. Yeah. But my brother had to sit and explain to him what I was doing. But my dad would say, like you just said, Kevin, push-ups, long distance, run the stairs, and do the bike. And he would do the bike after a game. He would just sit there, do the bike, do the bike. The bike to him was the best thing he could ever done. And he still preaches that to these guys today. Some start to listen, but they all have to start listening, because you can't tell me with all these injuries that are going on, what we're doing is working. It's the same way of telling somebody who's throwing 101 miles an hour and the ball doesn't move, keep throwing that ball even though you just gave up 5 home runs, because you're throwing 101. You got to learn how to pitch. You got to learn how to change speeds. You got to learn your location. Because unless you like to get beat like that, then I guess keep throwing that fastball right down the middle. Yeah. It's the same thing with this. Every year, the numbers are just astonishing with the amount of injuries in the game of baseball. And they still bring the same people to train. They still bring the same methods to train. And it hasn't done any good whatsoever. So, at some point, it's got to stop. And I don't know where that begins, to be honest with you.
Well, you know what, guys, in my field. Sorry.
Real quick, I'll just get in and out. But every year, though, what they do, Dan, is they make new excuses. This year, it's the start and stop of COVID. It's always something like that. It's always a new excuse. They fall for it, and they don't train like they should train. And again, the hamstring injury, when I watched that guy go down the other day when it blew, he was smelling a hit. He turned on the burst. And I guarantee you, he probably didn't sprint the whole time he was on the IL to that extent, to that kind of level. And that it all comes back to that kind of common sense, which is lost.
When you talk about, I think somebody brought up spring training. Yeah, I had a short story, but Jim Rice told me this. He's like, look, he goes, when your dad was playing, he goes, by the end of spring training, how many innings did he pitch in a start? I said, I don't know. I don't remember. He goes, 9. He was able to pitch a complete game by the end of spring training. All he did was train. Now, my dad played winter ball too, but these guys were ready. They came to spring training to train. And the way he said it, he goes, X pitch, I won't say who, that year threw the most, which was 4 innings in a start. That is another problem that we're seeing. They're treating spring training like Club Med. Right. They're out there swinging golf clubs instead of running sprints, instead of running long distance, instead of doing baseball specific exercises. And so they treat it that way. Now they come into the beginning of the season and they still can't hit. They still can't find the strike zone. These guys are getting hurt. they do. I see them everywhere I go. Every spring training complex I go and I see these guys. They're just sitting around. It's a vacation for them. It's an extension. Instead of working out in the off season as hard as they want to, you know what? Recover at that time period if that's what you want to do. Then come to spring training ready to play. And they don't do that. A lot of guys do not do that.
It's true. I mean, it's crazy now. You see in spring training, towards the end of spring training, they want to stretch a pitcher out. Oh, we want to stretch him out so he can get to 70 pitches. 70 pitches? 70 pitches? Nowadays, that's 4 innings. Are you kidding me? I mean, it's just, I don't know. Anyway, Sal, you were about to say something. I was curious as to what that was.
The part of the problem is people that do what I do, a lot of them want to create this aura of mystery, or it's hard to ask for $500,000 as a salary when you're telling them, well, all we have to do is a little running, a little sprinting, throw, and let them rest. I mean, there's people that there's this, it goes back to the other thing Dan talked about, the elite club. There's so much money in that, and parents I've sat there and talked to parents, you don't need to do X, Y, or Z. This is why, and yet they still do it. So there's a whole weird conglomeration of things at work here. But a big responsibility is, again, people who do what I do for a living at the high level. No one's taking them and sitting them down and say, we know what we need to do. Chris, we talked about Jerry Koosman. He's one of those underrated guys that came out of the Seaver Ryan stable with the Mets. He was still throwing, 250 innings as a 40-year-old. So we know how it's done. They just have to go back and recreate that. But there's a lot of people who want to they want to complexify this whole process when Dan has laid it out for you pretty simply with good evidence behind it of the things you need to do.
This is true. I mean, and how much of it is just also it's the style of play. It's just what the game is kind of morphed into. I mean, you have these giant guys who are swinging, to try to hit the ball to another area code. You have even bigger pitchers that are just trying to zip the ball in there at 105 miles an hour. So it's either home run, strikeout, or nothing. So, I mean, it's just how much of this, plays into that? Are they training for a sport that is, it's just, I mean, that they don't know what baseball is anymore? Kevin, curious?
Well, the pitchers are training max effort on every pitch, basically. Yeah, and that's a huge mistake. That's a huge mistake. Talking to Tommy Glavine about that recently, Tommy, the first year he learned the lesson the hard way. I think he lost 17 games. The next year he talked to hitters and he realized that throwing the hitter's timing off is what it's all about. So he could get it up to 95 if he had to. And once in a while he would throw a fastball that way just to show them, to put it in their head. But he actually, he pulled off the gas and became a much more successful pitcher. We have the complete opposite going on today. They're going harder, harder, harder. The spin rates more and more on the sliders. Ron Darling, real quick, Ron Darling told me, because I said, Ronnie, how did you stay so healthy all the time? And I forget who taught him this, but it was a veteran pitcher, like a Johnny Sane type, who was the greatest pitching coach of all time.
Detroit,
but right? they had, well, with a couple teams, but he, weighted ball, and they would do the alphabet with the ball. And I don't know exactly. I want to do that story for BallNine pretty soon. I want to talk to Ronnie about that, exactly how that was done. That would be part of the training. Take the weighted ball and just do an alphabet, and that kept him healthy. Didn't involve anything on the side. Then he could do his running on the side. What it is, and this is why I don't get it about baseball. They've thrown away all the good stuff that used to work in the past and created. And I think Sal might be onto something here. You can't sell the old stuff, so you got to sell the new stuff to make yourself as a guru. Too many gurus, and too many gurus lead to too many injuries. It's really that simple.
That actually makes sense. I mean, and it seems like these gurus just want to turn into just they're making it into a video game, and that's all it is.
This game's been around for over 100 years. It's not about reinventing it. You can't reinvent it.
They're sure as hell trying.
Ball, throw, pitch, hit, strike them out. It's simple. It's a simple game. But, you're right. You can't sell this package of the basics because it's not appealing. So you do have these gurus, quote unquote gurus, who don't know squat about the game and say, oh, listen, this is a whole new workout routine that we can do for your guys. They're going to get bigger, stronger, faster, and they're going to hit the ball instead of 98. They're going to go about 110. Oh, well, but he's going to get hurt.
Oh yeah.
But it's a great thing, so everybody buys it, and it's a lack of education on ownerships, and that they're listening to the wrong people. Front offices up to the very top, and I'll talk about the commissioner as well. They all are listening to the wrong people when it comes to the game of baseball.
No,
all of them.
I agree. And
that's why you see the big downfall that you see in the game today.
It's true. And honestly, really quickly, we're talking about, this is what's wrong. This is what's wrong. Kevin, you wrote in your column today, so just to bring a little levity to here, instead of us being like, screaming at clouds. Kevin, you wrote in your column today about the Savannah Bananas and how that was just kind of like, it's just like an oasis in this desert of baseball right now. And I wanted you to talk about that a little bit, because I'm jealous. I don't know about everybody else, but I'm jealous you got to go sit there and see a circus/baseball game and watch kids play because they love playing.
Exactly. And that's the hat I'm wearing today. And the Bananas it's basically going to a baseball game and a circus broke out. But here's the thing. They've taken the players and they've had a lot of fun. One of the things I didn't get into, but you know how they throw T-shirts? Well, they throw T-shirts too, but they throw whitey tighties underpants with a banana on it, like a banana hammock. And so there's humor in all different ways. And you know what's happened? The players brought into it. The players are doing dancing. They have a strength and conditioning coach who's 6.5 years old. So that's their strength and conditioning coach. So they make fun of everything. Yet the players buy in. They stay in shape. They do all this stuff. They had a Richard Simmons character come out, lead everybody in exercise. So it's just one thing after another, because I wanted to go see live baseball. And here's my big question, guys, and this is a whole nother thing down the road. How can the Savannah Bananas draw? Well, they had about 1,500 the night I went, but they've been averaging about 2,000. They cut it in half because of COVID. But they've been able to play all year long within that league, Coastal Plain League, and they, thank God, knock on wood, they had no COVID, no situations. And they're bringing in 1,500 to 2,000 people a night to games, and Major League Baseball brings in cut out cardboard fans. Yeah. And I think this dovetails into what we're talking about, because they're trying to make cut out cardboard players instead of athletic baseball players who do certain things. And let's get back to something we always go back to when we're talking about athletes, is Bartolo Colon. How did he pitch all those years? How does he make the play where he throws behind his back to throw out a runner on a bunt or whatever it was, swing and bunt? So I think Dan nailed it. And I meant to say something about ownership. Most of ownership now comes from hedge funds type guys. You can sell them a lot of numbers. You can sell them a new way. And that's what they're doing. They all want to impress the hedge fund guys. And it's going to be the elephant in the room. It's going to be Steve Cohen when he takes over the Mets to see what direction he goes. Because he has the most money. I've heard he's got maybe some baseball people who understand the game. One owner. It's going to take one owner to go back to baseball, and it's going to make a difference. And the Savannah Bananas, they basically have whatever we were doing, let's do the opposite approach. And they've turned it into a wonderful night out, good liquor, good craft beers, all the food you can eat for one ticket, free parking, and live baseball. You can't beat that. And it was just a joy, and it brought my faith back in the game, because that's essentially what we're talking about here. The game will take care of itself. And those I know they're college kids. They were running around like crazy, hustling, making great plays, diving. Nobody got hurt. And that, to me, that's what the game is all about, and that's what we need to get back to.
I'll start with Dan on this one.
Really?
Yeah, I know. How about that? You weren't ready for that, were you?
Listen, my final thought, I think Kevin had mentioned it with the new ownership in the Mets. We just need one owner. I think we need one owner to step up and go back to what baseball used to be. If we can get one team owner to really buy into the old system and how it worked, and it should never have changed, you might see something. If that doesn't happen, I would say watch out for a lot of the minor league teams that are folding and those teams, because you're probably going to see another baseball league emerge from that. And it's going to be the baseball that should have been played a long time ago.
I agree. Kevin, I'll go back to you.
Yeah, I want to bring up the Yankees because, everybody. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry to do that, Chris.
I was having such a good day, man.
Yeah, and look what's happening to their team now. The Orioles are wiping the floor with them. And
I know.
The Yankees are a classic example of if you let the injuries happen and you don't take care of baseball business in a baseball way, just look what happens to you. All that payroll, and we didn't get into that, but all the money wasted by guys injured. It's just incredible. But the Yankees have a new way. They have a new way of, getting guys in shape. They have a brand new pitching coach who never pitched professionally or coached professionally. And I'm not saying Matt Blake is the problem for this, but all of a sudden Garrett Cole isn't Garrett Cole.
Yeah.
So a lot of things going on. You can sell this all winter, but that's the great thing about the game. Scoreboard, baby. Scoreboard. Look what the Yankees are doing. And that's how a team that has a lot of talent will go right down the tubes from a few injuries.
You're right. In a hurry, too. Believe me. Sal, I would like to get your last thought on any of it, really.
Well, what I think we're seeing, and it's not just baseball, but we've touched on that concept of things becoming fragile. And the more complex these leagues have gotten and the hierarchy that's created this extraneous nonsense, it reminds me of stuff that happened in our economy several years ago. And, the middle management had taken over and people were not doing their job and production went down. And it was like, how did we get there? And it's similar to what's happening now. And I think they've built these systems that are so trying to take into account every possible variation of what could happen, which you can't. It breaks down as a result of this. And, we didn't talk football. I know this is a baseball thing, but even look at what's happened in the NFL, where we're in a position where one person goes down and your entire organization cannot function, and that's the quarterback. There is no other entity I can think of. One person goes down and the entity cannot function properly. And I think baseball is getting to that point where with injury and listening to the people who don't know the game, we're seeing that we're getting to that tipping point, like Dan said, it's either going to start going back to the way it should have been, or things are going to change and we're not going to recognize the landscape in the near future.
Well, that's an excellent point. Rocco, I'm going to get your final thought before we do your ombudsman role, please.
All right. Real quick, the training thing is such a cluster. I don't even know what else we can add. Kevin's article, I absolutely loved it. Made me love baseball again. But I want to use my time to just mention Tom Seaver, passing away this week. And it was reminding me almost of when Tony Gwynn passed. And you start looking up some of the stats, and they're just otherworldly. And there's so many crazy accomplishments that go along with Seaver. So a couple that stood out to me. He didn't have his first season with an under 500 record as a pitcher didn't happen until he was 37 years old. Wow. He came in and was a winner from the start, and he stayed that way all the way until the tail end of his career. And that was 82, bouncing back after a great 81 season he had in the strike-shortened year. He was Cy Young runner-up. Another thing was his age 39 and 40 seasons. He went 31 and 22 for the White Sox, who were a 500 team at best, with a 3.56 ERA. Most importantly, between the ages of 39 and 40, he had 16 complete games and averaged 240 innings pitched.
Wow.
Incredible. And I could sit here all time. To me, the best righty full body of work, it's either Walter Johnson or Tom Seaver to me. You could get in with Maddox and Clemens, Christy Mathewson too. But, man, what a loss. He's the Mets. He was a franchise.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, the ombudsman, Rocco Constantino, telling us what we screwed up. Rocco, take it away.
Not too many screw-ups here, but kind of screw-ups of omission here. We mentioned spin rate real early on in the show. The 4 best teams for spin rate in 2020 so far. the Reds, the Marlins, the Rangers, and the Diamondbacks. That's how 4 team fastballs. Their ERAs are 4.29, 5.14, 5.00, and Marlins were the best with 4.18. So that spin rate on that pitch isn't really manifesting there. The Dodgers, their team ERA is 2.67. They're not in the top 5 with spin rate in anything but curveballs. They're just about a run and a half better than any other team in the league, and spin rate is nothing with them. Another thing to add on the injury front, 2015, there was 28,111 days spent on the disabled list. 2019, just 4 years later, it almost doubled, 43,504.
Wow.
This year, it's different with COVID. Obviously, the disabled list and numbers are going up, but there have already been 402 players go on the disabled list this year. Last year was only 574. So this year it's 400 in a quarter of the season. They would have been on pace for 600 players on the DL in just 1 year. It would almost triple. So the trends are going up. The data's there for that. Crazy stuff. And one last thing, sorry. Dan mentioned Louis Tiant, his dad's workout. I was able to find an article from 1976 talking about Louis Tiant's preparing for spring training. He went to Brookline High School, pitched inside, worked on a knuckleball, then went and played some basketball, and then went swimming. And that was how Mr. Tiant prepared for his 1976 season.
Imagine that.
That's awesome.
And that was 1 month before the start. 1 month before opening day.
That's awesome. Well, guys, I want to thank you guys for hanging out and coming by. Rocco, Kevin, Dan, and our special guest, Sal Marinello, today. This has been the BallNine Roundhouse. We'll catch you next week. Take it easy.